G'day, I'm Mark Berg. For this episode, I meet up with one of the most experienced Barra-Anglers in the country, John Haenke. John is a veteran of both the television and recreational fishing community. Join me as I gain some insight into John's life and endless fishing knowledge.
Fishing actually started for me at a very early age. My father was a very keen fisherman, and he was the one that really got me started. And in those days we used to row out in an old clinker-built boat and fish offshore at night time, and it's some of the things we did I probably wouldn't do these days. But we had two old paint tins I remember very clearly, and one was for me to bail the boat with and the other one was to keep his mullet gut in. So they're very fond memories I have of those early days. And so fishing was always a passion of mine, but I think it really kicked in later in my life. I went through a stage where all I wanted to do was go surfing, and I still fished as well, but once I sort of matured a bit and got over that, I spent 5 years in the Northern Territory, and my passion for barramundi fishing particularly really kicked in. And that was the start of it. I read some of Vic McChrystal's books back in those days, and I read about all these exotic places and the lure fishing that he was doing back then, and which was something very new actually. Not many people were fishing with lures back in those days. So that's how it started for me, and I'm still loving every moment of it now. I was lucky enough when I left school, I got a job in Brisbane with one of the television networks, and I worked in their film department initially, and then went on to be a cameraman, which I've done pretty well all my life now. And I decided it would be great to combine the photography and the camera work with fishing. And I spent a lot of time trying to work out ways that I could do that. And I was lucky enough to get that going. Back in the early days, we used to shoot and we'd send our stories out on VHS, and we did a couple initially and they actually sold very well, and it got to the point where I started a business just specifically doing fishing, and we did a few other things as well, but that was my dream, I guess, and I'm lucky enough to have followed my dream, and this is what I'm still doing now, and I still love doing it.
Oh, this is always exciting, the first fish of the day.
I grew up fishing. My dad and Pop used to take me as a little girl. I used to have my own little Alvey reel, so I grew up fishing. My dad was also a commercial photographer, so a lot in common with John, which is really funny when I think back to my childhood and what I'm doing now. So I've been with John for about 20 years and been by his side through a lot of adventures while we've been filming for Escape with E.T. and Wild Fish and Fishing Down Under. But we've entered into a different phase now, and John's guiding, and he's really enjoying spending time with people and showing some of them the ropes. If he gets a really good fish, he's just absolutely stoked. But, you know, he's just really a good teacher, and he's very, very patient, and he's loving what he's doing.
So we've got leader.
Barra.
Barra! It's the right species.
Beautiful saltwater fish.
Oh, look at the colour of that, it's so silver.
Barramundi, I mean, man, they're just an icon on their own, aren't they? if you haven't seen a barra erupting out of the water, you haven't lived, have you, really? I mean, I just get excited thinking about it. And as for barra boofing, John was talking about barra boofs. If there's something that's going to get a heart palpitating, it's a barra boof. I mean, they're our acrobats, our speedsters, and, you know, if people come to Australia wanting to fish, it's barra that they want to target. And rightly so, they're an amazing sport fish. They just get the heart pumping.
Yes! Oh, shit, he's got some going. I hope that wasn't a hook that just pulled. This is a good one, this one. I got my thumb on there and it's burning like shit. To your left, Lofty, he's coming around the side. Well done, Vinny. For me, the Barramundi is my favourite sport fish in this country for a number of reasons. The locations you find them in, I love fishing isolated places away from places that don't get much pressure, and you can find them in so many different locations. And I never get bored fishing for barramundi because you can catch them out on the saltwater flats, you can sight fish to them, you can catch them in a deep water environment in an impoundment. Whether they're in freshwater or saltwater, they're a great looking fish. They jump, they grow to a huge size. And for me, they're the most exciting fish that you can catch in this country. Yeah, I guess as far as barra fishing goes, there hasn't been a lot of footage of me actually fishing. I've usually been shooting a lot of that, and since I've started guiding, obviously I'm trying to get, if I'd get any still shots of it's the other person catching the fish. And in the early days when I lived in the Territory, when I did a lot of barra fishing, we rarely took a camera. So I have got a few old photos, but one of the highlights that I remember very clearly, and we have got some footage of, was fishing with Jason Wilhelm.
Yep. There we go.
There we go.
The
First cast for the thing, Jason.
Good work, John.
Nice fish. Right, he's off.
He's off.
He's a good one. It was a very special day. There were a couple of days there, and then I brought a mate back and fished the same area a week after that and just had some unbelievable fishing too. And Jace rang me again, and he was very excited, and he said, mate, you've got to come up here and we'll just go for a fish, leave your camera behind. We did bring a camera, and I had another cameraman working for me at the time, and he shot the footage, and it was very special. So that was certainly a highlight. Back in the early days in the Territory, there were some very memorable days back then.
Getting some line back?
He's got me around something, but he's still there. I can feel him kicking.
Let's see the shrub moving.
Yeah, I can still feel him kicking.
Yeah, he's still there.
In fact, yeah. That was a good call, Jace. Your idea, put the thing on.
It's amazing how many times that's happened, you know. You haven't had any real joy with a fly, and you put a pink thing on and bang, look at that, perfectly hooked up in the jaw.
Right in the corner.
Oh yeah,
Look
great
at that.
fish.
Now that's a good barra.
That is a great barra. Well done, mate.
Well done.
Good work.
Yeah, thank you. You dragged him out of there. Just putting some water on the deck here so the fish won't lose all its slime, and
It's good practice, John, especially in the heat.
yeah.
You know, you keep that brag mat wet, you're going to look after the fish. It's a really good practice.
How we going there, Jace?
Let's have a look, mate.
110.
That was pretty close. 109, mate.
109. I've been lucky enough to see some really outstanding fishing action and visit some of the best locations in the world. Things that come to mind, fishing for massive dogtooth tuna in New Guinea with stand-up 80-pound gear and just getting smoked, and seeing the downrigger balls come in with holes that looked like someone had actually hammered a nail into them where the dogtooth had grabbed hold of the downrigger ball. We've had some pretty specky heavy tackle fishing. I've seen 1,000-pound marlin come out of the water right behind the back of the boat, and but having seen a lot of that, the thing I really enjoy more than anything is being in Australia fishing for barramundi. Is without a doubt my favourite species in this country, and I love my saltwater flats fishing too. So if I get a day off from guiding, which I'm doing now as well, I go out with one of my mates, and we do a bit of saltwater flats fishing. Got him this time. Ah, wow, they go. Work out of there.
Their first explosive run across the flats is indelibly etched in the minds of all fly fishers who experience it.
Very shallow water here. Yeah, I guess the main thing I enjoy about guiding is the fact that I do meet a lot of interesting people. And I enjoy that, and I enjoy taking them especially to a place they haven't experienced before. So seeing them actually enjoying that experience, and for me it's the whole day. If they have a great day and they come home and said, well, I've just had a fantastic day, that's what it's all about. Whether they catch a lot of fish or whether they might only catch a couple of fish, doesn't matter to a lot of people if they have that really good all-round experience and they learn a lot. Most people come back and say, well, even if the fishing was tough, we actually learnt a lot today, and if we go and do this again in the future, we've got a much better chance of catching the fish. But I guess the ultimate thing is, if you put somebody onto their personal best fish or a trophy fish, and seeing their reaction to that, for me that's what guiding's all about, and that's what I enjoy about it. So when we're fishing the shallows here, stealth comes into it a lot, if you've got an electric motor, you've got to try and get up in those shallows, and the fish in the shallow water are much more aware of something that's not quite right than the fish that are in the deep water. So you've got to be fairly quiet, not be too noisy in the boat. Get up in the shallows and try and work out, finding the fish is one of the biggest things initially. If you know where they are, the frogs are usually worked, because they're quite light, they're worked with a spin rod, and you can cover a lot of water with the frogs. You can put in big long casts with a spin rod because it's a light lure, and you can cover a lot of water. If you've got an open bay with shallows where there's a lot of weed, that's where they work well. Got him. Have you got the net there? Coming up, fellas. Oh. Right. You got him. Well done, Mark.
Well done you. Oh, there's weight there.
Yeah, that's a barra.
Fat fish.
Put it there, mate. Well done. Look at that. Aren't they beautiful? The stick baits are fished quite differently, and again, more often than not, they're fished quite slowly, and it's a matter of trying to work out what mood those fish are in, because they are quite moody at times, and if something isn't working, then if you're fishing slow and you're not getting a bite, try fishing a bit faster. But more often than not with barra, I'll start slow, and they will often sit there on a snag, and if there's one fish, you'll quite often get more in the same spot. And you've just got to keep, if you've got a snag that looks like a barra might be fishing on it, and after a while you get a feel for the sort of snags they do sit on, just keep casting to that snag. Sometimes you'll have 20 casts and nothing will happen, and suddenly one fish will come out if you annoy it enough, and it will hit the lure.
He's still there. Keep working. It's not slow down. He's going after.
Felt the hook spinning. I had him on.
Go, John, go.
No, I hooked him, and it just pulled for some reason. He was taking line.
Oh, that was like how many times?
And quite often when that happens, the rest of the school will fire up too, and they think, oh, you know, there's a bit of competition. My mate's just had a feed, I'm going to get out there and find something too, and you'll get a number of fish off that one snag.
Yes! Oh, I pulled out. You got him.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll get him.
It's off again. Oh, gill raker.
Just get his head up.
Oh, gill raker.
Yeah, next time round.
nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Excuse the
I
ladies.
didn't even see the strike. I
can't
turned around to look at you blokes.
I saw that weight coming on.
I didn't even see
I just
that.
heard the smack.
Oh, it's a
Oh,
cracking
That's
fish.
a
Look at the size of that one.
We might have to measure here, mate.
Oh my Lord, look at the size of that.
That is a good fish, mate.
You
On the
are a dead set legend, mate.
Nice.
Holy smokes.
That's a horse. That is a donkey. Look at it. What do you reckon, Vinny? Come
No,
on.
I reckon that's short. I reckon it's 1.13 m, and that'll do me. But
So what's my price for being close to
one thing about that though, it's 1.15 m or 13, but look at the height of the body. It's absolutely
That
enormous.
thing's gut was full. That'd be like a 25 kilo fish, I reckon.
Oh, absolutely.
Easy.
Oh, goodness me, that's a big fish.
Vinny's here, Vinny Versfield's here fishing with us, driving the boats, and he's a great angler too. And he said to me yesterday he'd been out all day and he had a quick kip on the boat, and the thing that woke him up was a barrabuff. And then he started fishing and had a great session. And I remember very clearly a similar thing happening at the mouth of Elizabeth Creek on the Daly River. We had a runoff happening at the time, and the barras just weren't there when we arrived there, but we knew sooner or later on the tide they were going to turn up. And I went to sleep in the boat, and the thing that woke me up were barras buffing. And there's no better thing to wake up to something like that. And the first cast, I hooked a barra that was well over 1 metre, and I remember that so clearly, and that was probably 45 years ago. So I still love it. I always love my barra fishing, and I always will.
I have to agree with you there, John. Any angler that's felt the power of a jumping barra falls in love with them instantaneously. And it's safe to say, John's deeply in love with them. I hope you enjoyed this experience as much as I did. I'll definitely be back to Peter Faust Dam to do this again.